Welcome back to the Big Sky Podcast Network Power Rankings, week 3, or if you did week 0, it's week 4. I'm your host, Brian Marceau. Typically a solo venture. Did this a lot with Patty last season. Patty's coaching football on his own, like doing actual stuff. So we'll see how often we have someone else on. But today, I'll go in a little bit early because that's how I can make it work. You guys know the drill. Shows presented by Tubbs at the Club, meaning presented by Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey. We'll talk about that later. We cover power rankings on the show. I mean, like, kind of loosely, power rankings are not, I don't know. It's my excuse to talk about the conference, guys. Like, we have a little bit of rankings. We talk about that a little bit, but mostly we care about the week that was. We care about interesting things going on in the Big Sky. Voting is done from Big Sky Podcast Network contributors, guys like me, guys like Dallas Hammer, guys like Brent from the Grizz Fan Pod, guys like Kyler Neal, sometimes from FCS Fans Nation, and then beat reporters who cover the conference. Just guys we know who know the conference pretty well. But with that said, we're going to start. Hey, this is Around the Bar, brought to us by Hughes River Expedition. So look, if you are looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, do not look past your backyard. Hughes River Expeditions has been vandal-owned and operated since 1976 and are ready to take you out for the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River no return, the Salmon River Canyon, or the Selway, and check out special trips like the one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, and fish on the most remote stretches of river in the country. You just bring your clothes, let HRE handle the rest. So grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now, 406-540-4450, or check them out at hughesriver.com. All right, so look, starting at number 12, and I'm not going to talk about the lowest team in the conference that much, but hey, top 5 Portland State is your number 12 team this time around. And what happened this week for Portland State? Hey, the good news for the Vikings is they're off next week. Portland State lost 23-3 at Hawaii. Not really going to add more here other than Portland State has played 4 different quarterbacks throughout this season. The Vikings have played 16 quarters and scored 23 points. This is officially the year that Portland State has fallen off a cliff. I am done talking about Portland State. Honestly, I don't even know if I'm going to acknowledge Portland State much until the Vikings pick up a W and become at least moderately interesting moving on. Number 11. Now, this was actually a little surprise for me. So Eastern Washington comes in at number 11. And it's honestly, if we're talking stories of the Big Sky season, Eastern to me is one of the sadder stories that we're going to have this year, because we've seen the drop. And look, Aaron Best he's been Eagle for life. It's actually, if you like Eastern, it's a cool story that Aaron Best played as an Eag and he's been an Eag coach forever. This is actually a type of continuity a lot of us in the conference wish our schools could have. And it's looking like it's moving in the wrong direction. It's not looking like it's moving in the wrong direction. It is moving in the wrong direction. Eastern loses again, 17-14 to perennial playoff contender Northern Iowa. So look, at the very least, it was tight. Northern Iowa on the year, counting this win, Northern Iowa sits at 2-1. Having beaten Eastern and beaten Butler, that's Pioneer League, and then a loss at Mountain West, Wyoming. So, hey, do we know much about Northern Iowa? No, but what do we know about Eastern is this team just can't actually score the ball that well. Through 3 games this year, their season high is 21 in their week 1 loss at Incarnate Word. And since then, in a blowout loss to Mountain West Boise, and then lost this week, the Eagles scored 2 touchdowns each time. This game, we have Nate Bell taking over at quarterback. Jared Taylor's out for, to my understanding, the year with a pretty serious injury from the BSU game. Nate Bell's not fantastic. The Eagles team looks different with Bell in because he, generally speaking, does not rush at least as effectively as Taylor. Bell threw it 35 times for 159 yards. He did lead the Eagles with 14 carries, 89 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Should be noted, virtually very, very little contribution from the running game outside of Bell. We've got 11 total carries for 27 yards from the Eagle running backs. And I mean, I already covered the Eagles put up 159 through the air. So if you're used to the Eagles putting up a lot of yards, they did not. 276 to 495 by UNI. So Eagles still allowing teams to do whatever they want. UNI did have 2 turnovers that hurt them a little bit, but whatever. UNI ended up winning the game. I mean, they were up 17-0 entering the fourth quarter, and the Eagles made a version of a comeback. Next week Eastern, they're going to be on. The Eagles will be hosting Western Illinois. If Eastern's going to be okay at all, it's important to get a win. Western Illinois, not exactly a national power. They're sitting at 1-2 with their 1 win over Valparaiso. Their 2 losses are Big Ten losses. So we'll see. But the story of Eastern is they can't score and they can't defend. And what that is generally going to mean is if that's who you are, you're just not going to win a ton of football games. The number 10, this is a little bit of surprise. Cal Poly. I'm barely going to talk about Cal Poly. They played a D2 game. I don't care about Big Sky teams playing D2 games. Cal Poly beat Western Oregon 56-7. And I don't even know if I want to talk about box score takeaways. I mean, Ty Diffenbach had a good game earlier in the year as quarterback for Cal Poly. This game, he threw it 11 times, got 3 touchdowns. I mean, they won 56-7. I don't care about this game. Moving on. The only thing that I'm curious about here is Cal Poly over Eastern. But if I actually talk this through, I can see how Cal Poly can put some points up. And I mean, look, they're not a good defensive team. Neither is Eastern. But Cal Poly, we can explain how they're going to get some points moving through the air. Cannot explain that with Eastern. Northern Colorado, they're a number 9 team. And Northern Colorado, they actually do have a little bit of intrigue, at least in my mind. And this show at times gets accused of being like Northern Colorado centric on accident because a few years ago, like the McCaffrey train wreck, it had to be covered. But Northern Colorado has they have played some tight games. Do they have a ton to show for it at this point? Absolutely no. Northern Colorado does not. But hey, once again, Northern Colorado, they're consistent. 0-3, 1-2, said the Bears with a D2 win in week 1. The Bears have scored 17 points every single week. Good news. It's more than 12 from the last couple seasons. The bad news, 17 is still 17. The Bears lose in overtime to South Dakota of the Missouri Valley Football Conference. South Dakota, they're like, I have to say this once. A ton of FCS teams, honestly, until halfway through the season, we don't really know who they are because of schedules and because of what that means. Because if you're playing, if you're playing D2 teams, that tells us nothing. If you're playing Power 5, Power 4, my bad, RIP Pac-12. If you're playing Power 4 teams, that tells us pretty much nothing too. But anyway, 2 teams, and South Dakota had 0 wins heading into this game. Northern Colorado had 1 win, but it was D2. So it's an overtime game. Once again, now the Bears games have been low scoring. That counts. Last week's should have been victory, but narrow loss to Colorado State. Preposterous bullshit loss because of a shitty Mountain West ref. But they've all been, 24 points scored by South Dakota is actually the most points any team has scored in a Northern Colorado game this year. So the one takeaway I will say that's positive for Bear fans trending up is that we know Northern Colorado, they're the mirror opposite of Cal Poly. The Bears need low scoring games, but they've been able to hold opposing teams, whether it's D2, FCS, or Mountain West. The Bears have persistently been able to hold teams to lower scoring totals. Now, that doesn't mean no yards at all, because the Bears actually shockingly accrued 427 yards, probably their best offensive outing of the season. narrowly outgained South Dakota 408. And the Bears did not turn the ball over either. But of course, the thing I'm going to bring up, though, is you score 17 points. It's pretty goddamn easy to lose. Starting quarterback Eric Gibson taking over because Peter Costelli was injured in week 1, 28-39 for 336 yards and a touchdown. But the kind of a heartbreaker, really, for Northern Colorado. I mean, it's 10 to at halftime. South Dakota leads, and no one scores in the third quarter. Northern Colorado, they force overtime with the final 2 scores of regulation, a touchdown with 5 minutes left, Charles Gibson, 24-yard pass from Eric Gibson, and then an 18-yard field goal with 3 seconds left. But Bears don't score in overtime. So takeaways here are, one, I'm starting to feel cautiously optimistic about Northern Colorado at least being the F word in Big Sky Podcast Network circles. Frisky. 3 games in a row, they've been able to hold teams to 24 or fewer. And throw out the D2 game. 2 very, very close games. This Northern Colorado team very easily could be sitting at 2-1. And we'd be talking about the significant defensive progress Ed Lamb's made this year. So, of the bottom 4 teams, probably the team that I'm going to pay the most attention to now is Northern Colorado. And there's honestly a case for Northern Colorado to be rated above a couple teams we're going to talk about, or to say, like, hey, if Northern Colorado and Idaho State are playing today, who am I going to pick? I don't know. And we haven't talked about Idaho State. So obviously Idaho State's a little bit higher. The Bengals were off this week, so we'll be talking about them for like 10 seconds. But that's, if you like teams in the Big Sky to be at least competitive, because you're going to have more fun watching competitive games, at this point, Northern Colorado is a positive story for you. This coming week, the Bears are going to be taking on, Houston Christian, and I don't know conference Houston Christian's in, but they're typically lower rated team. Certainly not like playoff level. Houston Christian on the season, Houston Christian sits at 1-2 with a win over Arkansas Baptist non-D1, and then losses to East Kentucky and Nebraska. So, hey, we don't know anything, but Houston Christian's been pretty bad for the last handful of years. We're going to move on, but before we move on to talk about before we move on to talk about the rest of the conference, got to talk about vandalgear.com. Look, vandalgear.com has absolutely stepped up to the plate with Vandal merch. This is the best place to get your Fightin' Tater shirts. That was a one game thing last week for Vandal fans, but also the entire internet liked it. You can buy those Fightin' Tater shirts for $25 on vandalgear.com, half the price you're going to find them elsewhere. And vandalgear.com, they don't just make Vandal apparel. The company's name, Pacific Custom Sportswear. They've been Vandal owned and operated for 25 years. They've worked with the University of Idaho, other companies, schools, organizations to put together a quality custom apparel. They can work with your company. They can work with the logo that you present them with, and they can set it up well for printing and embroidery. They don't just do shirts too. Like, you can do hoodies. You can do sweatshirts. You may talk to them about hats. They've got a lot of Idaho apparel, but if you've got your own needs, get a hold of Pacific Custom Sportswear. Best place to buy Vandal stuff, though, vandalgear.com. All right, dudes, back to the show. Captain 58 saying Southland, right? I think so, man. Full disclosure, I cover the Big Sky as close as I can, and I have what I would call vague or broad knowledge about the other conferences, aka ankle deep. So I just know Houston Christian's been pretty bad for a while. Moving on, Idaho State did not play this week, and you might be sitting on the edge of your seats wondering, okay, well, hey, Idaho State did not play this week. They must just have a fantastic game to close out the out of conference. Yeah, they do. They played Lincoln, which means I have to talk about Lincoln again for 2 seconds. Big thing to watch is hey, Davis Harsin looked like he's probably going to be the starting quarterback after last week's like competitive game with New Mexico, which looks better and better as New Mexico keeps looking pretty good. But I'm done. Look, they play Lincoln. They didn't this coming week. They played no one this week. I guess we don't get to talk about Idaho State very much because I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste your time with sub D1 stuff. Weber State coming in at number 7. Now, legitimately, I'm going to stop for 2 seconds, just say one of the stories of the conference to me. There is an absolute cliff from number 5, maybe number 6, if you believe Sac State has finally put it together. There is an absolute goddamn cliff between when you go from 5 or 6 down to 7. Because truly, I think everyone who is not Portland State, 7 to 11, is a coin flip about who you would pick to win those games. They're all teams that have absolutely catastrophic flaws, and a couple of them have some relative strength. So that's just part of my understanding of the Big Sky Conference now, and something I think people should pay attention to is it's not like top heavy like just 2 teams, but there's a lot of teams in this conference who are trending. There's an intersection of trending radically down, like Weber State over the last few years. They're just down trending. Eastern, just catastrophic, down. Portland State, I mean, no one feels good about Portland State, but they've been competitive the last 5-7 years or so. They're not competitive this year. They're trending way down. And then you have some teams that are like kind of ticking up, but it's not a huge step. Like I know Idaho State, when Cody Hawkins got there, it was a big step up compared to Charlie Ragle, but I don't think anyone has seen Idaho State this year and thought, oh yeah, that now looks like a playoff team. No, their schedule has not been helpful, but they got their ass kicked by SUU. That's kind of the bigger one for me that I'm looking at. Northern Colorado, look, I just covered. They're playing great defense, but still, like they've scored 17 points every game. They haven't shown that there's any big difference that they're going to have offensively. They need games to be super slow. Cal Poly, maybe they're like kind of treading up because they can score a little bit, but they're not going to guard anyone. And their big scoring games have been against not particularly great competition. So there's no way you can cut these teams 7 through 11. Again, Portland State's different. They're just all not that good. Any of them could beat anyone on any given day, but I think any of them will absolutely struggle mightily with teams 5 or 6 and up, and will need a combination of these lower rated teams having great games and the other teams just absolutely not taking them seriously, or just turnovers that did not need to happen for these games to be competitive. Am I trying to avoid talking about Weber State? Yes and no. On the good side, Weber State did pick up a win over McNeese, 42-21, avenging last season's loss. This was our first glimpse at Weber State offensively, as in like, okay, like what are they going to do? They lost virtually all contributors from last year. Quarterback Jackson Gilkey, 11-20 for 218 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. But Gilkey contributed on the ground, 15 carries for 114 yards and a touchdown. Easily the most effective runner for Weber State. And that there's actually a few teams who their running back is their leading rusher. Kind of a side note, I don't talk early about conference leaders, conference stats, because and when we get into conference season, I try to talk about like actual conference seasons, those stats from, the apples versus apples games of the Big Sky versus the Big Sky. That said, the season leaders in OOC for rushing, top rusher right now after 2 games is Eli Gilman, averaging 140. A lot of that buttressed off Central Washington. The number 2 rusher per game in the Big Sky is Joshua Wood, averaging 91 yards per game. The number 6 rusher in the Big Sky is the aforementioned Jackson Gilkey at Weber State, averaging 58 yards per game. He's done for the year, but the number 8 rusher in the Big Sky, Jared Taylor from Eastern, done for the year, but averaged 55 yards a carry. Number 14 rusher, I know I'd like, hey, that's a big jump, but it's Justin Lamson, Montana State, 38 yards a game. And then he played just 1 game. I talked about him earlier, but Nate Bell for Eastern, he's averaging 41 yards per game. I just say that because a theme it looks like you're seeing this year a little bit more than other years is A lot of teams have a quarterback who's mobile to some extent. Hey, Caden Pinnock at UC Davis, we know he's mobile too. So, hey, just a thing to be aware about as the season goes is a lot of teams are relying on mobile quarterbacks. So, back to talking Wildcats. Kind of a wild game in that, yeah, it was 42-41, so it's tight. But the other thing, fourth quarter, 34 points scored between Weber and McNeese State to close that game. So, hey, game ball for Weber is going to have to go to Gilkey for the accruing the 2 touchdowns. But hey, on the ground, Davion Godley, 22 carries for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. So McNeese is not, no one's going to accuse McNeese of being like a playoff level team, and no one's going to accuse Weber State of having any sort of defense this year. They'd given up 40, averaged about 45 plus in their previous 2 games, James Madison and Arizona. This game, they gave up 40 again. So Weber has not had a single game where they've held the opposition to below 40 points. And McNeese State accrues 537 yards on the game. Turnovers were even at 2-2. So in short, I honestly think what you're going to look at is, hey, McNeese was kind of okay last season, but obviously didn't make the playoffs. And Weber State looks like they are pretty goddamn even with the team at the level of McNeese. Take that for what you will. Weber was able to move the ball, but if you're trying to parse team's identity so far, Weber is very Idaho State adjacent, as in they're going to have to put up points because they absolutely cannot stop anyone. They have stopped no one on the season. All right, guys. Before we hit the top half of before we hit the top half of the conference, we're going to talk about Snake River Stampede Canadian whiskey. Look, Snake River Stampede, one of the best buys in Idaho State liquor stores, whether you get the entry level Stampede or you want to buy up and get the small batch 1915. Look, they both come in under $40. The Stampede is about 25. The 1915 is $38.95. Both have a double barrel finish. Both whiskeys are 3-grain whiskeys, 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% malted barley. They're absolutely fantastic. Especially if you're into Canadian whiskey, because that 3-grain, because that double barrel finishing, you have extra complexity. You got a few extra flavor notes for me, especially on the Stampede. A couple things that hit me is kind of like light brown sugar on the top. You got some wood influence there. And to me, like you kind of finish with kind of like a candied cherry on the exhale. You can't go wrong with either whiskey, but honestly, like I always have a bottle of both of these available. Grab yourself a Snake River today. All right, guys, Sac State, we got to talk about the Hornets. The Hornets won a game. Was it an impressive win? Absolutely no. This was not an impressive win, but the big deal for Sac State is getting together at all. Pause real quick. Weber State hosts Butler, non-scholarship Pioneer League. If Weber State sits at 2-2 in the OOC, they're going to call that a big win, but don't confuse them for being any good. Sacramento State beats Mercyhurst. Now, who is Mercyhurst? Mercyhurst is one of those teams that gets their ass kicked by a couple Big Sky teams every single year. They sit right now at 1-2, having lost to Sac State and Youngstown State. They beat New Haven 48-14 in week 2. But anyway, about the actual game. One, I talked about it last week. The Jane Rashad experiment in Sacramento is over. Starting quarterback is Cardell Williams, another dual threat quarterback. I don't know how much they're actually going to run him, but this game, Cardell Williams rushed 6 times, 52 yards and a touchdown. Went 8 for 17 for 176 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns. But I will say, for the record, neither Sac State, Jane Rashada just looks legitimately bad. Cardell Williams at least contributed at Tulsa, but thus far, neither quarterback through Sac State looks particularly accurate. And hey, we're in the comment section, Ron Lowney saying the Sac State defense sucked. Tight game. Crewhead 76 saying tight game in the third. Captain 58. Sac looked bad for most of that game. And look, they did. While I was monitoring that game for about half the time, I thought, oh my God, Sac State's going to go 0-3. It's going to be a complete catastrophe. And hey, like basic point here, this was a 21-18 game at the end of at halftime. Sac up by 3. This was a 28-25 game at the end of the third. And then Sacramento State just poured it on the fourth. Three touchdowns. Mercyhurst crews a field goal. Those 3 touchdowns all came on the ground. Damian Henderson rushing for 2 of them. Cardell Williams rushing for 1 of them. And that was a game. But it took Sac State a long time before they were able to really overpower Mercyhurst, a team that off that talent-wise is not in the same class as good Big Sky schools. Sac State did put on 525 yards on the game, held Mercyhurst to 89 rushing yards. But whatever you do to Mercyhurst is not something you should be bragging about. Takeaways from this game: do not if you're Sac State, if you're high on Sac State, which is not a lot of people at this point, what you're saying is, oh, hey, that team in the fourth quarter, that's who I think they are. If you are not preposterously high on Sac State, what you're saying is, yeah, it took them until the fourth quarter to really pull away from a pretty bad team. And I don't think that means Sac State has things together. But I do think of the teams we've covered, I am more high on the likelihood of Sac State becoming a bit of a threat in the Big Sky than I am of Weber State or Northern Colorado, because I think there's at least talent there. But I think the project is a little bit tougher than what some people thought it might be. And hey, maybe that finishing middle of the conference projection that some people did have heading into the season, it's not looking exactly like that's a bad pick. I think the thing to track is Cardell Williams he engineered a little bit of the comeback last week against Nevada. He also threw the game-winning touchdown to Nevada, and they can at least move the ball a little bit through the air with Williams over Rashada. But if we were to draft quarterbacks right now through the top of the conference, 6 and above, I do not know who would take Cardell Williams based off the small sample size we have. I don't know who would take him over their starting quarterback. NAU certainly would not. Idaho certainly would not. Montana State probably would not. UC Davis most certainly would not. Your only question is Montana. Maybe. We'll talk about them in a second. Captain 58, Sac could have burned those millions, the alleged $4 million NIL budget, and actually gotten some energy out of it. Would have been a better use of that cash. Only 3 points against South Dakota State. Ron Lowney's saying, yeah. So I guess, look, South Dakota, the story for them is the same story it's been the entire season. Is we know they have talent. Are they going to? When are they going to kind of get things figured out? I will say, as of September 14th, I don't think that Sacramento State has it figured out. But after that after at least a productive good quarter, you can at least see when they're clicking what they can do offensively. But it's weird because Sac State, they're this weird afterthought in the Big Sky. I mean, kind of afterthought, kind of not. They're out of the conference next year. We all know about Dr. Luke Wood, who I said this last week, dude can't shut up. And it brings additional negative attention. I know he just wants attention and that's it. But Sac State, if they're not going to win games, I don't know I don't know how to really say anything other than, look, a lot of people thought they'd be a train wreck, and with the amount of new guys they have coming in, and they have been a train wreck so far. Peter, oh man, I always forget how to pronounce your last name, Pete. Pete Soth in the comment section. I think Sac State is showing what everyone else thought they would be. That is probably as fair an assessment on Sacramento State as there is. We'll say, hey, Damian Henderson had his best game of the season on the ground, 12 carries for 98 yards, 3 touchdowns, and Rodney Hammond Jr., 11 carries for 81 yards, no touchdowns. But there are a lot of backs, and look against Mercyhurst, Sac ran the ball 42 times for 349 yards. I guess that's the other thing that I'm going to say is, I know the go-go offense is supposed to be 50-ish, 50 split. There's no way that team can be a 50-50 split, passing the ball, rushing the ball with the quarterback play they've had this season. There's no question that the takeaway for Sac right now is the way they've been effective is on the ground. When they have been effective, that is going to be their route to putting up points. The next team we talk about, UC Davis at number 5. Davis was off this week, so not really much to add. The only thing I can add really is Davis they'll be back next week. Davis hosts Southern Utah, who will be part of the Big Sky next year. which is a great segue. SUU has played their third OOC Big Sky game, just like Utah Tech this last week. They played their third OOC Big Sky game. Both those teams will be joining the Big Sky next year. And I'm only saying this because I watched the Idaho game where, spoiler, Idaho defensively dominated that game. Utah Tech, they got past the 50-yard line like twice. They scored 2 field goals. They scored twice, 2 field goals of over 50 yards. I say that because Utah Tech played UC Davis closer than they played Idaho. They played NAU closer than they played Idaho. And having watched Utah Tech, I don't know, like, hey, they NAU gave up 31 to Utah Tech. I have no idea how Utah Tech can score 31 on anyone based off the game I just saw. I saw UC Davis had to have a pretty big comeback. They scored 24 points to eventually win, to win their matchup against Utah Tech in week 1. But I just say that because having seen, it was week 2, or having seen Mercer was week 0, Utah Tech week 1, because UC Davis was just off. Utah Tech scored 24 points against UC Davis, and at one point, Utah Tech led UC Davis by multiple scores. I have absolutely no idea how that's possible to have happened, because Utah Tech, they led Utah Tech in the third quarter, led UC Davis 24-7. I have no idea how Utah Tech could lead anyone 24-7 that's in the Big Sky Conference. So only reason I'm bringing that up is having seen what Utah Tech looked like against Idaho, it suddenly made me pause a little bit on Davis. I've kind of been a little on the lower side on NAU, not as a put down. Like, I think NAU is a fringe playoff team, but there's a lot of at least at the start of the season, a lot of energy towards NAU from the national media, essentially assuming like an extra step's going to be taken this year under Brian Wright, who's been good for sure, like at NAU. I don't see it. And last week, having played Utah Tech close is a reason to give me pause on who NAU is. Yes, I'm talking Davis, but Davis didn't play this week. So Davis is kind of like, they're obviously a good FCS team, not trying to write Davis off. If you have not paid attention to UC Davis on this year, their week 0 game was canceled. They sit at 1-1. And when I say cancel, I mean it's declared a no contest due to weather against Mercer. Right now, Davis sits at 1-1 with a win over Utah Tech, and they got their ass kicked by Washington. Southern Utah might be a little bit better Mendoza line for comparing the Big Sky. That's who UC Davis has this week. But they didn't play this week, so I'm not talking about them further. The number 4 team, Northern Arizona, your Lumberjacks. They had what you might call the game of the week in the Big Sky, at least from like a fun standpoint. Northern Arizona narrowly beats Southern Utah 52-49. So at the very least, that game, well, let's say that game had some legs. Southern Utah actually came back and took the lead in the fourth quarter before NAU was able to score with 27 seconds. Was able to score with 29 seconds left. That was a touchdown, make it 50-49. Then there's a safety on the final play. But look, Southern Utah and NAU, this was pretty tight for a lot of the game. I mean, early NAU in the second quarter was up 28-14. So in the third quarter, NAU led 28-14 after Ty Pennington's 22-yard touchdown pass to Justin Purdy. But SUU, it was still back and forth. There's a lot of scoring after this point. SUU took the lead with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter on a Joshua Dye 4-yard touchdown run. That's what made it 49-42. Then, following drive, NAU eventually scores. The thing to look at here is I just referenced Utah Tech a minute ago, scored 31 against NAU. And I am not convinced that NAU does not have a pretty garbage defense after giving up 31 to Utah Tech and then 49 here to Southern Utah. They did give up 447 total yards. and forced 0 turnovers. But if you score 52 points, you did a couple things right? Well, hey, Ty Pennington is probably Big Sky Player of the Week this week. 20-31, 366 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. Also rushed a touchdown as well. His rushing stats are not fantastic, but he did pick up a touchdown. Seth Cromwell leads NAU on the ground, 12 carries for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. Colby Katzis, 6 catches for 135 yards and 2 touchdowns for the Lumberjacks. Led them in the receiving room. All right, so what I'm taking away from this game is kind of twofold. NAU look, this was more explosive than NAU looked most of last year. One of the things I've talked about this season is, hey, Ty Pennington threw 2 total picks. Expect that to come back down to earth. But Ty Pennington has shown definitively he is, if he's not the best pure passer in the Big Sky right now, he's at least in the discussion for it. When I reference that theoretical, like, hey, drafting of quarterbacks, if the top 5 teams, top 6 teams could draft quarterbacks, I think a few teams would say, hey, we have the right guy for what we are. Like, he had Idaho, like Joshua Wood is because of what a good runner he is. He is the right thing for what Idaho needs. But as a pure passer, it's probably hard to say there's a better pure passer in the Big Sky than Ty Pennington. That is real. So, NAU trending upward, although they do look, I'm not saying they're exactly this just based off of this game, but like, hey, based off of surrounding a good amount, way more points to Utah Tech than anyone reasonably should. And, what we saw this game, NAU is templating a little bit more like a old school Eastern Washington type of team. So if you're checking temperature teams, that's what I'm looking at. Northern Arizona, this coming week, the Lumberjacks, they finished their OOC hosting Incarnate Word. Incarnate Word had a week 1 win over week 2 win over Eastern Washington, 31-21. They got their asses kicked by Nichols in week 1 and then lost to UTSA this last week, 48-20. So look, Incarnate Word, hard to know what they are other than overrated relative to preseason polls. But Incarnate Word's made the playoffs for multiple years in a row. Like that is a program that's been pretty good. Big Sky, relative to the FCS as a whole. So that's not a nothing game. And if NAU can pick up a W, I mean, look, we're talking about the Lumberjacks heading into conference play. A win would put them at 3-1 and out of conference and winning on a 3-game winning streak. They lost week 1 to Arizona State, but just told you they beat Utah Tech and SUU, 2 teams who will be part of the Big Sky next year, back-to-back weeks. Did they look the most impressive in those? No, but a win is a win. We enter OOC, we finish OOC play, and you have your FCS wins or you don't. And realistically, NAU, if they can pick up a win this week, they will have as impressive an out-of-conference schedule for playoff purposes as anyone in the conference. That no matter how you feel about them, I'm still not 100% sold on them being good. They're clearly not bad, but NAU could seriously have the most impressive resume for playoff purposes as far as like 3 FCS wins as anyone in the conference. So that's absolutely not nothing. Moving above NAU, number 3, the Idaho Vandals. Man, this was an eye of the beholder game. I talk about that sometimes with different teams. Is like, hey, you're going to take away what you're going to take away. On the one hand, I already referenced it a little bit. Like, hey, Idaho won 20-6. Idaho absolutely dominated this game defensively. Utah Tech they crossed the 50-yard line like twice. But I say that because Idaho was up 13-6 with 6 minutes left in the game. Ron, not putting Idaho at number 2. No, I didn't do that, Ron. I don't put these numbers together. This is averages of people who vote. But Idaho sits at number 3. Now, hey, let's just talk polling for like 10 seconds. I don't actually care about polling. I care about what the teams do. If you're high on Idaho, you say, hey, they just picked up 2 FCS wins against teams that are not the best in the nation, St. Thomas and Utah Tech, but they're FCS wins. And Idaho has shown promise in those 2 FCS wins also that they should have beaten WSU. But if that's not a win, it's not a win. But still, Idaho has not had a no-show game this year. That's what you're saying. That's the case for Idaho. The case against Idaho is okay. Well, I don't know. Well, like, does Montana State losing in double overtime to South Dakota State? I know it's a loss, but like, is that more impressive than any game on Idaho's schedule? I think there's a lot of people who say that is not. I certainly would say that's not the dumbest take I will hear during this college football season. But I'm really high on Idaho. But Idaho is a team that it feels like they're close to getting things together. Look, the Vandals rebounded from, admittedly, Idaho was not good defensively in week 2 against St. Thomas. They're great in week 1 against Washington State. That Washington State level of effort and production on the defensive side of the ball, that was back against Utah Tech. Honestly, Utah Tech accrued nearly 40%-ish of their offense on about 3 to 4 total broken plays. One was a 37-yard pass, a very great diving catch. Nothing to take away from Utah Tech offensively there. But then there was 2 running plays from their two quarterbacks. Utah Tech runs this weird 2 quarterback system. Bronson Barban and Reggie Graff. Neither's a great passer, neither's a great runner, but that's what Utah Tech has to work with. Both those guys, Graff had a 23-yard carry. Barban had a 13-yard carry. Both their carries, they kind of bounced off tackles. They did not break tackles precisely. It's kind of like they bounced off. But I just covered of the 247 yards Utah Tech accrued on the entire game. A huge chunk came on 3 total plays. Utah Tech could do nothing against Idaho defensively. But the Vandals, in spite of if you didn't watch this game, the wildest stat from this game is Utah Tech possessed the ball for 50 seconds in the first quarter. Idaho just milked 2 real long drives and slammed a 3 and out of Utah Tech right away. The problem is at the end of the first quarter, it was 0-0. So Idaho they have some things really working well. Like against Utah Tech, the ground game was a lot more. This was easily the best game for University of Idaho running backs. This first week, the quarterback Joshua Wood did not lead the Vandals in rushing. Wood did rush for 85 yards, and he had his second consecutive nail in the coffin late touchdown run. But Art Williams was the story of the day on the ground for Idaho, 16 carries for 144 yards. So the first game, like I said, that running back has led Idaho in rushing yards. Joshua Wood through the air, 14 to 25 for 119 yards and a touchdown. What's holding Idaho back? Because I just said they completely dominated defensively. They outgained Utah Tech 405 to 247. The Vandals had 5 yards in penalties, no turnovers. Led time of possession just under 35 minutes to just over 25 minutes. So a 10-minute advantage time of possession. So why was this a 13-6 game when until 6 minutes left in the until 6 minutes 27 seconds left in the fourth quarter? Why? Idaho just was not capitalizing on drives. The Vandals did miss 2 field goals, but even was able to capitalize on those field goals. Sorry, guys, my internet's freaking out for a second, so I had to kind of ramble. Even if Idaho was able to capitalize and make those 2 field goals, it still is not a complete blowout relative to the way the rest of the stats were. Again, hey guys, forgive me, I had to ramble. Internet was just completely flipping out on my end. You guys probably didn't see anything, but I saw and heard a ton that was annoying. Curious how much that actually made it through the microphone. Idaho did switch kickers from Cameron Pope, who missed 2 field goals, to Owen Forsman, who did make 2 field goals. Fine, but if you're a Vandal, which I am, I'm more concerned with some of the drives sputtering out after once they get to around the 30-ish yard line. It's this weird mix of Idaho feels like they're still trying to figure out who they are offensively, both from a combination of play calling standpoint and hey, who does this team really think they're going to rely on? Crew had 76 saying receivers that need to catch the ball. It's another thing. 3 kind of big drops for Idaho that could have blown this game open and changed the entire tone of how I'm talking about this game. But look, the big takeaway for Idaho, they have looked excellent defensively through 2 out of 3 games. Offensively, they've been up and down. They looked great. They've looked great offensively 1 out of 3 games, but like this game, it's not like Idaho was terrible offensively. They did a ton of stuff right. It's just the Vandals were not able to capitalize and turn that into points. Does that matter against a team like Utah Tech? No, not really. But not being able to capitalize offensively has already cost Idaho what would have been a gigantic win against Washington State in week 1. So Idaho's got to figure that out at some point. I think absolutely Idaho has the talent and the schedule. Ron, you're going to say this year. Idaho's got the talent and the schedule to probably go 7-1 in the Big Sky if they can figure things out offensively. But if they're not going to capitalize offensively, there's going to be some games that Idaho should win that they will not. I think the Vandals will figure it out because from what I saw against St. Thomas in week 2, Joshua Wood is absolutely a good passer. But again, like Crew had said, like Idaho receivers can't drop touchdowns off their hands. They can't drop first downs off their hands. And there were about three off their hand passes that they just dropped. That's it. Utah Tech didn't do anything Vandals did. Rob Myron's comment section, maybe just figuring out play calls at the 30/red zone. San Jose, good next step in play calling. San Jose State's a winnable game. That's who Idaho has next. San Jose State sits at 0-2. They're on bye this week. They lost week 1, 16-14 to Central Michigan, who of the MAC, who are not exactly world beaters. Got their asses kicked by Texas in week 2. Did not play this week. I think, look, for the most part, the template for a lot of Big Sky Mountain West games this year has been Big Sky teams are competitive, but they keep coming up short. That's Idaho WSU. That's Sacramento State, Nevada. That's Northern Colorado State. And UNC got screwed that game. I'm not saying Idaho State should have won, but Idaho State hung tight with UNLV and they hung tight with New Mexico. So this is absolutely, circle it, a winnable game for Idaho, but the Vandals have to capitalize on drives better than what they did against Utah Tech. Honestly, Utah Tech, that game, I kind of left that game feeling different than a decent amount of Vandals. Like your glass half full is like, hey, Idaho ran the ball really well, guys. Like their O-line's looking solid. Yeah, they've got some stuff. They kind of got in their own way. That's why that game was not a blowout. So if you're not concerned about the game for this week, that's your takeaway is like, hey, like you think Idaho's figuring stuff out. If you are cautious, if you're a little concerned about Idaho offensively, what you're saying is like, okay, like whatever, like Utah Tech, it's irrelevant. But if they're capitalizing on possessions against Montana like they did against Utah Tech, the Vandals are going to lose that game. If Idaho capitalizes on drives against UC Davis the way they did against Utah Tech, Idaho will lose those games. So that's why I said this is an eye of the beholder game. My co-host Dallas, he is less concerned about Idaho offensively than I sound, at least tonally. He believes a lot of this stuff is going to be fixed. And, to be fair, Idaho catches a few of those passes and this game is over. Crewhead 76 says, I'm concerned with red zone offense. It's more to me, the concern is to me is a little confusion because Idaho has the pieces to be good. It's just clearly, it's not yet clicking once we get to about the 30s well enough. There's reason to believe Idaho could get better. They need some running backs to get a little more healthy. Eli Cummings was banged up this week. Nate Thomas has been banged up the whole season. Art Williams stepped in played great this game, but it's clear Idaho does not want Joshua Wood to be taking near the volume of hits that he took in week 1 against WSU, which is great news. I don't want Joshua Wood to get tackled as much as he did against WSU. But Joshua Wood, I think when Idaho's going to score a lot, I think Joshua Wood is going to be has looked like they're probably going to be a more quarterback centric team when they score a lot, meaning it's Wood through the air and then Wood with his legs, both on designed runs and broken plays. But, we'll see. Idaho head coach Thomas Ford's a special teams guy, and he was a running back in college, former running back coach. Idaho clearly wants to run the ball first. Now, run the ball first can mean various things. We saw that with Jason Eck. We've seen that with guys like Aaron Best, even guys who want to run the ball a lot. That doesn't mean that they're going to. That doesn't mean that they still don't really abuse teams through the air as well. Rob Maurer, new coaches, new players, but I see improvement in the coaches' emphasis on attitude, no penalties, work ethic, new kicker. all going in the right direction. That's a fair point. Idaho over 100 yards penalties against St. Thomas, 5 this week against Utah Tech. So I guess the other thing it says, like, hey, the things the coaches focus on, they have improved. Like, hey, the defensive focus week 2 versus St. Thomas not good enough. Radically different week 3. So if you're Idaho, that's what you're looking at. If you're asking me, literally, Marcel, how do you feel about Idaho? They are damn good defensively. The relative strength is linebackers and D-line. They don't get to the quarterback that well, but they absolutely have been stopping teams running the ball, which I care a little bit more about than just getting to the quarterback. Secondary is the relative weakness. It's younger guys. There's absolutely some talented guys. Caleb Bricks at corner is very good. But the secondary is more still figuring things out than like the linebackers and D-line are. Offensively, I think Idaho has all the pieces to be good. Like the relative weakness is there isn't like an all Big Sky level, like game breaking wide receiver on the roster, but there's a lot of guys who are solid and like solid possession receivers. Like, hey, Ryan Jesiaro has been a reliable target for Joshua Wood. We know to expect Gabe Hoffman, tight end, eventually get some more catches, but Idaho's got pieces. They've got probably the best quarterback for their roster they could possibly have in Joshua Wood. So I think Idaho has the talent to win the conference. They have the talent and the schedule to win the entire conference, Ron. I absolutely believe that. But they're like all teams right now. Every team, even the good teams have question marks. I already covered UC Davis and NAU. We'll get to Montana in a second. Montana's not looking like they're a slam dunk either. So we'll see. Now, moving on, talk about the Grizz. But hey, patreon.com/Tubs the Club to support the show. If you're a Vandal, I don't know why in God's name you're not there. It costs less than a cup of coffee. It's the best place to talk Idaho sports online, bar none. If you're not a Vandal, you can still support the show. You can support what we're doing here for less than a cup of coffee a month. And we also have a pretty active chat about non-Idaho games too. One better place to talk online. All the garbage on the internet that you might be used to, it does not exist there. It's just 90% of it, 99%, just people talking sports, having a good time. Patreon.com/Tubs at the club. All right. The number 2 team we're going to talk about, Montana Grizzlies. Montana looked like they were definitely going to lose the game of the week, the actual game of the week in the Big Sky. But a late touchdown from Keely Ayat, 28 yards late, is what tipped the scales in Montana's favor. That touchdown came with 1:35 left, entering the fourth quarter. At 1 minute into the fourth quarter, Montana trails 23-14 to North Dakota after a Corey Ty 4-yard touchdown pass from Jerry Kaminsky. But the Grizz, they're able to look. They come back, they pick up the win. If you don't like the Grizz, like Ron, it's not bad for the Big Sky to pick up some wins against the Missouri Valley Football Conference. So I don't know what to tell you. It's even if you root against Montana, you should be happy when the Grizz pick up wins because it's just good for the conference, especially in the out of conference. So look, this is Ayat's second start, and I got to tell you, Ayat has not been lighting the world on fire. 4 touchdowns and 4 picks through 2 games so far. Both games against Central and against Central Washington, D2, and North Dakota, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. This game, however, 3 for 300 yards, 25-39. On the ground was not productive. Ayat historically has been a red zone threat. Eli Gilman, 16 rushes for 82 yards. I do bring that up because, hey, Gilman was electric against Central, who is D2, and that is completely worthless. This level of production, 16-82, is a little bit more in line with what I kind of come to expect from Gilman. The Grizz usually just don't give him that many touches. I got to pause for about 2 seconds. Sorry, guys, doing this live, like my throat dies sometimes. It just died a second ago. So back to the Grizz. Gilman, 82 yards. The other thing I want to pay attention to is last week against Central, Michael Wortham got a ton of touches. That went away. Michael Wortham, wide receiver, kick returner, gets rushing touches too. They only got the ball in Wortham's hands 6 total times between rushes and catches, and that was for 26 yards. As a kick returner, he did had 3 kick returns for 77 yards. Long was 30. No, one punt return for -4 yards. So Wortham was not electric against North Dakota the way he was against Central. And the way, hey, Wortham, we know from his time at Eastern Washington, he's a good player. But one of the questions that you're always going to have for Montana is like, how will Hauck & Co. like actually let their star players produce? And usually the answer is they don't really go out of their way to get star players touches. Michael Wortham's a guy who I think could be a huge player in the Big Sky and have a much bigger role than he had at Eastern. One of the confusions of Eastern last year is why in God's name they wouldn't get Wortham more touches. Well, hey, early returns are Wortham's not going to get that many touches. Ron Lowney saying the Grizz D line is too small. Crew had 76. Gilman wasn't that impressive this week. It was an impressive win in the sense that North Dakota is a top 10 team right now. So like definitionally, that's a good win for playoff purposes. But if I'm a Grizz leaving that game, it's a sigh of relief that the Grizz pulled the game out. I'm not leaving that game thinking like, oh man, this is the number 2 team in the conference. This is the top 10 team, in the nation. There's also another thing we're paying attention to is, hey, the Grizz have a completely new defensive 2 deep. How is it? Well, they gave up 460 yards to North Dakota. Actually kind of impressive that North Dakota found a way to lose that game when they outgained the Grizz by just under 100 yards. And the Grizz had 2 turnovers to UND's 1. Very impressive that UND found a way to lose that game. And I bet if you're a Fighting Hawk, you think, hey, if that game gets replayed 9 times, they're going to win it 9 out of 10 on that season. But you play it once, and North Dakota picked up the loss, and that's why we have our Grizz at number 2. Someone asked, Ron asked, hey, like Grizz at number 2, meaning Idaho not at number 2. Why? Well, like the argument for the Grizz right now is, hey, like whatever, Central means nothing, but the Grizz now own the most impressive OOC win of the entire Big Sky season. So, take that for what it's worth. Last team, Montana State. Montana State picked up their first win of the season. The scheduling gods do not create all OOC schedules equal. Montana State had a very rough week 1, week 2, Oregon, and then a double overtime loss at home to South Dakota State. Montana State fans probably feel the same way Idaho fans feel about the WSU game, except this is the South Dakota State game of Montana State had chances to pick up the win. They just didn't. Big deal. It doesn't necessarily hurt you to lose to a very high quality opponent, but it's what could have been a huge positive in your playoff resume that is now out the window. So Montana State murders San Diego. Now, before we dismiss this, San Diego does have a win over Southern Utah, that same Southern Utah team who murdered Idaho State and who took NAU absolutely down to the wire. So I'm not saying to completely dismiss this, but the Bobcats against San Diego, they looked the way that you would think they would. Justin Lamson, he threw the ball around pretty damn well. 293 yards on 26 attempts, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. On the ground, the Cats spread the ball pretty well. Leading rushers, Julius Davis, 8 carries for 83 yards. Adam Jones is still not really gotten himself going this season. 13 carries for 46 yards. I say that. Adam Jones was preseason offensive Big Sky player of the year. So that's the offensive production. But I will say a thing to pay attention to. Montana State gained 538 yards, held South Dakota to 214. Now, part of that is what you might call the template of a good Big Sky team against a Pioneer Conference team, where it should be an obliteration, and that is what happened. But hey, just like Idaho held Utah Tech to 247 yards, it's not nothing to hold any D1 team, especially D1 team who's winning, who has at least a win, and against a pretty good Southern Utah team. That's San Diego, holding that team to 214 yards on the game. Absolutely not nothing. But takeaways are, I don't know if I don't know if Montana State, I talked about that imaginary quarterback draft. I don't know if Montana State would really want to trade Justin Lamson for anyone. He looks like he's fitting in just fine there. 23-26 again for 293 yards, 3 touchdowns. Actually, it's kind of weird to think of Montana State being more effective through the air. They had 321 passing yards to 217 rushing yards. But a thing that I will say, Montana State, you are on the clock. Lamson looked good. The Bobcats lost a lot of offensive line talent last year, and it's too early to me to say what level of production they're going to replace or how good their O-line is going to be. Ron Lowney saying they just need time to develop. Yeah, but hey, just like Idaho's kind of got to get this thing together. Now, Montana State, they had the rough first 2 weeks. But look, the Bobcats at least do have a little breathing room, heading into the close of out-of-conference play. This week, they have the Titan Mercyhurst, who pushed Sacramento State for 3 quarters, and then Eastern Washington. So essentially, counting San Diego, Montana State has about 3 tune-up weeks to really get things together before they're going to take on NAU for their first Big Sky game. That could realistically have some drama. But like Crew at 76 said, Adam Pac-Man Jones ain't doing it this year. Jones has not really exploded yet. And like, I don't know, like the teams are year by year, we know that ebbs and flows, and what the tendencies of what good teams do ebbs and flows every year. That's going to be exacerbated now that, look, I can acknowledge we're playing football 2025. Rosters change. I covered earlier, and hey, Justin Lamson is another version of this. There are a lot of teams in the Big Sky who are probably going to be a little bit more quarterback centric, with their quarterbacks producing both through the air and on the ground, than there were last season. That's just a fact of what I think we're going to be looking at in the Big Sky. There's probably 5 or 6 teams where they're going to be relying on their quarterback to produce regularly on the ground as well as through the air. And I do want to bring this up as a credit to Brent Vegan. We know he's a good offensive coach. We know he's been able to recruit to replace guys. Montana State might need to rely on the pass game a little bit more this year. We had Kevin Marshall on the show, the main show, Tubbs of the Club, earlier this year, and he said Justin Lamson against Oregon, he showed you, like, he might not be the best quarterback in the league, but can he hit an 8-yard slant on 3rd and 7? Yeah, he looks like he can do that. So we know that all these teams are coming together. We know every good team too has some significant demerits that they need to try to resolve. Ron Lowney saying the secondary needs to get better, but D-line is their strength. That matches like Idaho's description. But what you'd say about Montana State is, one, they had a chance to win against South Dakota State. They did not. And they have not been as productive on the ground as they historically have. That doesn't mean they won't score points. Put up 41 against San Diego. But maybe who you thought Montana State was the last few years, they just might need to be a different team this year to pick up it more, a bye in the first round of the playoffs. But I'm saying demerit is in, if you thought the Cats were going to roll teams on the ground the way they have the last few years, the Cats have not yet done that. So we'll see. But they also were effective through the air. You talk about Montana. I think Montana has a ton to figure out, and their defense looks terrible at this point in the year. So hey, that's kind of their demerit. And Ayat still looks like he's kind of okay. Hauk's letting him play. That's probably a big deal for development this year, which Hauk had not done that the previous couple of years at quarterback. But Montana's got huge questions too. Idaho, they've just been kind of up and down and trading if the defense shows up and the offense shows up. So like the question for Idaho, or the demerit, is until they both are regularly showing up, they're not. And Idaho still has some things to figure out. And I also just covered, talk about Davis and NAU. Davis and NAU have some glaring spots on their resume too. I just think that's going to be football 2025 and on. Is the OOC, every team that's good is going to have some stuff they're working through. That's the nature of the volume of turnover that exists now. But like we can tell, the Big Sky's got a lot of talent, a lot of interesting teams to pay attention to, a lot of storylines to track to. But I will say, like, hey, soapbox moment for a second. I think you can say dismiss the bottom 7 teams, or sorry, the teams 7 through 12. You can dismiss them. Sac State, they're not yet completely dismissible, but they're not that far from being dismissible. But the top 5 teams, I think there's every case in the world to make for NAU. I'm lower on NAU than I am on Montana State and Idaho, but there's a case for NAU to say, hey, like they're going to be in the best position for the playoffs of any team in the Big Sky if they pick up a W against Incarnate Word. The case for Idaho is, look, even if they're sitting at 2-2 and they're competitive through 2 FBS games, you could head into OOC and say like, okay, well, Idaho's got to figure out stuff offensively, but they're good defensively. That buys you a lot of margin for error. UC Davis, they're an eye of the beholder team too. I mean, I know against Mercer, that game theoretically doesn't count, but essentially in their win and no contest, Davis played a full game of football over 8 quarters. Looked real good in the first half against Mercer, then gave it away. Looked real bad in the first half against Utah Tech, and then picked it up. So, like every team's still putting things together. I'll be back next week. I went a little bit longer than I wanted to, but hey, this is just how it works. Comment section. Thank you for chiming in. Rob Marr saying Idaho, the best position in many years to take on the best in FCS. It feels like UC Davis looks weakish. I mean, I'm with you. Like realistically, I'll template here. I don't know where to bracket Montana. They did pick up a big win and against North Dakota for sure, but there's some. Montana's been underwhelming offensively the last few years, and I don't think they're a good defensive team at all. So what that means for the Grizz moving throughout the Big Sky season, I think they're going to have to be able to score a few more points. I just do, because I don't think Montana's is a good defensive team at all. Will they probably be better later in the year? Yes. Are they good? No. I think Idaho, like if I were drafting the teams that I want or feel the most comfortable with, Idaho has to be at worst number 2. Montana State, like you might as a Bobcats fan, like Ron, say, well, look, like they had 2 rough games, but like against the garbage team, they absolutely look like the Montana State of the last few years, as in they beat the shit out of them. So I feel fine. Okay, I'll give you that. But I think if you are not calling Montana State and Idaho after 3 weeks, probably the best, the top 2 teams in the Big Sky overall. Like screw the voting that we just had, screw the resumes. Just talk about what teams have produced. And when I say screw resumes, I mean like win loss for a second. Just talk about what teams have produced. I think unequivocally, like the actual debate about who you should be slating to win the conference as of today would be Idaho and Montana State, and jockeying those 2 teams is what we're trying to figure out. Thanks for joining this week. We're main shows on Thursday. We do our post game show for Idaho on post game show on covering the Idaho game on Saturday, Sunday as close as we can. Ron Lowney is 535 yards, struggling. Okay, Ron, I don't know why I'm extending this out. I most certainly should not. I think we just covered that Montana State won as 538 yards. No, they were not struggling at all. It's that the composition of Montana State's yards was different with what you'd call Idaho what you could call Montana State from the last few years. That isn't bad. Like Montana State's going to put up points. Brent Vigen's a good coach. Just composition is different. But I think you should slot Montana State and Idaho as those top 2 teams. And what at this point, they don't play each other. So like both these teams theoretically could share the conference title. You would say of those 2, like you probably think Idaho for a fact has a few more things they need to resolve that could get in their way of going, let's say 7-1 in conference. But those are my top 2 teams. I'm just going to call it slam the door shut. Thank you everyone for showing up. Share the show, support Tubbs the Club. And until next week, I will, check out the other shows, or I'll see you here sometime later.
This is producer Brian doing a terrible job of even finding what we're going to play us out with. So we're just going to call it good. See you guys Tuesday. Motherfucker.
Go Vandals.